Since 1945, Weatherby's been building the finest firearms and ammunition in the world. And today, we're proud to continue that legacy from our facility in Sheridan, Wyoming. This is On Our Mark, the Weatherby Podcast.
Welcome back to On Our Mark, the Weatherby Podcast. I'm your co-host, Luke Torkeldsen, Chief Operating Officer here at Weatherby.
And I am co-host as well, Tyler Grayton. I am the Marketing Manager at Weatherby.
Tyler and I were talking the other day. I was telling him I'm a little bit convicted based on some of the comments that we've had on our last couple of podcasts, as we had some guests on, and they were like, "Who are they?" And I just kind of say a name, and we go on, and we just jump into things. And sometimes I get excited to talk about the content, and we don't often or well enough cover who we are or who we're talking to. And I think we've done a good job having Adam portrayed very relatably. Like he tells people more than maybe he even should as the owner and CEO of a business. And he's kind of a public figure. But when I started hosting this podcast like 6-7 years ago, I never really told people who I was or what my story was. And we never really did anything other than "Hey, Tyler, I don't know how to say your name right. And you're the marketing manager, so let's move on."
Yeah.
And I thought it'd be a good idea to just maybe focus on us a little bit.
Yeah, this one will be fun. It is really easy to when you're working with someone from product development, and we work with these guys every day, to just be like, "Hey, let's get into our podcast topic." And it's you've been on before, and it might have been 2 or 3 episodes ago.
Just, we get excited. I live and die by my calendar. And sometimes I'm maybe too efficient with it. So maybe take that as a formal apology. But after today, I'm probably going to have to owe another apology, because they're going to be like, "Oh, we know those guys more now, and we're still not happy."
Yeah.
Just kidding. Okay, so we're just going to kind of interview each other a little bit, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, this will be fun.
Broad question, but how'd you get to here?
Yeah, man, it's a long story, but kind of the short thing is, man, I always grew up hunting, and I always wanted, when you're a little kid, you always think what would be cool jobs? And you're like fireman, all those things.
Yeah.
And I think at an early age, I was definitely in filming hunts would be sweet. Just my small story is when I was younger, I vividly remember practicing archery with my friend, and we had a broken camcorder. It didn't work.
Yeah.
And we were trying to mimic the guys that were on Outdoor Channel, but we were shooting a 3D archery target. So we'd be like, "Oh, no, we're not on them yet." So
what we've got here is a buck.
Yeah. So it was honestly archery, hunting. So I grew up, doing the whitetail thing. We have an awesome rifle season during the rut, so it was always a good time. So did that, and then got into archery in middle school and high school. And then from there, just kind of wanted to hunt a little bit of everything, right? So my dad in high school had always gone out west. But it was during football season, and high school I was definitely into sports, and I think kind of that competitiveness and that want to be outside and do things, it kind of has now in my early adult years led me into pursuing hunting more seriously. So there was always kind of I wonder if I could make this into a job.
Right. So I had a hard time getting into the outdoor industry. But how was your okay, it's one thing to say, "I'm going to work in the outdoor industry," and it's a whole nother thing to kind of pull it off.
Yeah.
So how did that, how'd you get into the outdoor industry?
Yeah. So I went to school at the University of Missouri. I did agricultural business management, and a lot of people always tell the story. It's "Oh, I am going to get a job that doesn't have anything to do with my degree." Well, I actually did, coming out of college, used my degree. I was a commodities trader.
Good on you.
And what that essentially means is I was doing the stock market for agricultural products.
Just trading corn,
hedging futures markets, doing all these things. And that job was pretty cool, pretty lucrative. But I actually did not like my job at all. It was one of those things where I'm a year in.
Just the day-to-day, what you're doing.
The day-to-day.
Wasn't fulfilling.
Not passionate. There wasn't really that drive. You have to be it's a big numbers game thing. And if you're good at math, you're going to be good at it. So I was always good at that part, but like that drive to only want to make money, it just didn't really do it for me. And it was also like one of those things, like I grew up on a farm and I felt like it wasn't like true to who I was, like what I loved about farming. The numbers and money took all of that love out of it. So, that job was awesome. It taught me a lot about risk management and all that good stuff. And it actually took me to Colorado. So I had never even really seen the mountains before I graduated college. And then once I graduated, I got to move to Colorado and just literally fell in love with it. And since I didn't love my job, I felt like I was like living for the weekend because I wanted to go out and, elk hunt and do all these, like hike and do all these things. So, man, that just got to a point where I had gotten a promotion at the job I didn't like. And I'm like, I'm going to be stuck doing this for my whole life. So I honestly kind of just took a risk. I quit my job and it was like.
With nothing lined up.
Nothing lined up. I mean, when I was pretty lucky that, so there's this company called American Outdoor Brands, which is a big publicly traded outdoor company. At one point, it's part Smith & Wesson, and a lot of the brands that were there were like early Midway USA type thing. So there was actually kind of a little outdoor hunting culture in Columbia, Missouri, where I grew up. So I had heard of it, like when I moved away doing this other job for 3 or 4 years, they just happened to build a 600,000 square foot facility in my hometown.
I remember when they announced it, I'm like, that's enormous.
Yeah. So I came back one time to visit. I'm like, there's this giant outdoor company in my hometown. So a few months later, I was like, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to get a job there. But I had only submitted an application. It wasn't even for anything that I wanted to do. I'd always wanted to do something marketing wise. And the first job that I applied for was like a logistics manager, operations of some sort, and I didn't get the job. So I had just quit my job.
That had to feel like very discouraging.
It was a little discouraging. My parents had moved to Wyoming though, and we always kind of had this like love for the West. And I was like, well, if I don't get a job here, I'm going to go volunteer my time and try to work for an outfitter and just be a packer. Cause I had kind of
good backup plan.
Yeah. Absolutely. I had kind of like, it's like either get a job or become like a live in the backcountry dirtbag. We're kind of the two.
I had a portion of my story that I was very close to just living that dirtbag lifestyle.
Yeah. So anyways, I got to talk to one of the HR people at AOB where I didn't get the job. And they're like, you have a very interesting skill set. Like we have like 3 or 4 other jobs that would probably be better for you. So I got my foot in the door in sales at AOB. So I was a part of the international sales team, helping with, just day-to-day orders type thing and logistics of we have an international team here with Kyle, and you know how the paperwork.
Is it a team if it's only one?
We have a single unit, but with international, it's interesting because also we did like really fun things of like trying to sell to like military type things too. So when you're talking about with other countries, there's a lot of permits and paperwork.
There is a lot of like just hoops that you got to jump through.
Like winning bids and doing all kinds of stuff. Yep. So that was a really exciting job. But yeah, like getting into the outdoor industry, like people always ask like for advice, and it's like, you can't be in it for the money. Cause a lot of your foot's in the door do not pay well, because the job that I took was probably about half of what I was making at my last job. But at that point, it's like, I don't care. I didn't care. I was like,
you weren't married. You didn't have like, a family to look after.
Yeah. And it's like one of those things where you just kind of believe in yourself. Like, hey, if this is a passion, it seems like you find a job you really like. And then sometimes the money part just figures itself out. So I took that job. I was living with buddies and stuff. It was kind of a totally different lifestyle. Moved back to Columbia, and finally I was there for like a year and a half, and then got my foot in the door in a marketing position. That's what I'd always wanted to do, was marketing. I love that storytelling. I love like bringing products to market. Nice. Yeah. So like our equivalent of a marketing manager was actually a brand manager. So you're kind of like bridged the gap between marketing and product development. Here we kind of have that as 2 separate jobs. Mm-hmm. But there was like a lot of, market research and then bringing products to market. So it was awesome. So I did that for a year or 2, and then got promoted and took on a job of Meet Your Maker. That was the brand.
Yeah, that's where we met.
And that's actually where Luke and I met. So we were doing a sweet field to table event in Texas where we took riders from like sighting in your Weatherby rifles and then harvesting a whitetail and pig. And then from there we did like all of the primal cuts and just like really taught these riders like every like step from like making brats at the end and stuff.
Yeah.
So
I really enjoyed that class. Like I had at that point cut up, I don't even know how to quantify many animals, but I'd never done it in a way that with a quote unquote expert, like an actual chef, like a trained chef, he made it look so easy. First of all, he's like, oh, you just, and like these perfect cuts. And usually you're in the backcountry, you're like, okay, I got 30 minutes before it's dark. I got to just start hacking away. And we didn't do anything like crazy different, but just showed like some ways like where you can angle the knife a little better, or like cutting out back straps instead of just like sawing along. It's just like one continuous pull. And I was like, oh man, ever since like my back straps look 10x better.
Yeah. One of my favorite things about that. So I grew up on a farm. We did like custom natural beef. So like my dad was in a butcher shop every week. So like I had some good knowledge before and then took that into my job where, okay, meat is a meat processing company like gear so that you can do it yourself. So doing those, I think my favorite thing about doing those classes was like really identifying each meat group. So instead of being like deer roast, it's like, no, that's an eye of round. Maybe we should, that's more close, like a backstrap. You can make a really good something out of that. Or there's like the round roast where it's like, oh, maybe that's better for jerky or something like that. So
football.
Yeah. Yep. There's the football, as a chef would say.
Yeah.
So that was a really fun event. And yeah, that's where I met you and then John Solberg, who's on our sales team. It was just an awesome event. And I think it was maybe 7 months later or something. We were shooting 6.5 RPM on that. It was the Mark V.
At that event.
At the event, it was 6.5 RPM, and it was the Mark V Hunter, I think, had just launched prior to that. So that was one of the first riders events that rifle was on. And I was like, man, I needed myself a new deer rifle. So I reached out to John. I was like, hey, do you guys have anything industry, like an industry discount or something? I was looking for a rifle to buy.
He's like, no, but we have an employee discount.
Yeah, exactly. So he's like, oh yeah, no problem. Here's what this is. And he's like, hey, we do have a marketing position open. You should check it out. And I was like, oh yeah, that would be cool. Weatherby's hiring. Like I would have never, like in my head, I wasn't really looking for a job. I was like, man, Weatherby's like one of those brands that I've always loved and kind of respected.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law had a 257. So I'm like, oh, those guys were awesome at the show. So I didn't actually apply or whatever. And I was getting my gun order in. And I think I emailed John back about 2 weeks later. And he's like, hey.
No, really?
He goes, hey, I heard they're going to close the application. Maybe you should do it. And then so I talked to I talked to Savannah, who's my now fiance, and I was like, there's not many jobs that I would leave because I'm like living in my hometown at a brand I really like.
Yeah, you went from the not loving your job to I felt like you really liked your job at Meet when I met you there. So
yeah, it was great, and it's like not many people like your hometown too. Like I grew up 15 miles from where I worked every day. So I was like, Weatherby's like one of those brands where I would leave for. There was a handful of like brands that I truly loved. So I just remember putting in my application, and then it was not long after HR David, who still works here, called me and was like, hey, I just saw you put in an application. I was like, yeah, like 10 minutes ago. And he's like, it says
we move real fast here.
Yeah, he's like, well, it said that you didn't want to move to Sheridan. Would you be willing to move to Sheridan? And I said, oh, yeah, I must have answered that way wrong then because I'd be pumped to live in Wyoming. So, awesome. So then the rest is kind of history. Did the whole interview process. It was like the fastest, slowest interview process ever because it was like quick. And then Adam went to Africa for his like first time going to Africa.
Oh, yeah. There was like a pause because we wanted you to come here in person.
Yeah. So, and I remember it was 4th of July that year. I came out early. My interview was Tuesday, but I came out Friday and then spent the whole weekend just checking out. I remember I was getting on Zillow, checking out houses in the housing market.
Weren't you, like around that same time, weren't you doing something with Remy?
Oh yeah, the week before I had just
Because that like kind of played into it too. Like you couldn't do something, one of the other dates that would have worked for us because you're like, yeah, I'm got to do this thing with Remy.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
So Remy, man, the industry is just so small too. So once you get that foot in the door, it's funny. So I was filming with Remy, with who my cameraman, his name's Zach Kurzieski, which now Zach works full time for Remy. So it's just like this funny small industry thing.
It is a small
So
industry.
yeah, we were filming some recipe stuff. Actually, that was one of my favorite projects at Meat, as we did dehydrated backcountry meals. So we used the meat dehydrated like 5 different meals, and we did recipes. It was awesome. Did recipes and all the things for it. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
I remember that. Where it's like, oh, okay. Well, it sounds like he's well connected.
Yeah. So that was also the cool thing is, I guess Remy wasn't a Weatherby guy at that time, but like Brian Call and Lampers and the Hush guys had all used meat stuff before, and it was like, I already have a lot of the connections that Weatherby was. It just made a lot of sense. It felt like so. The rest is history. I think the move story is kind of funny, and I'll tell that one real quick. So after I accepted the job, I did my 2 weeks, and I'm still good friends with all the guys over at Meat now. Today, we still would consider them industry partners at Weatherby. But I did my 2 weeks, and that was ended on a Friday. I left Saturday, had the whole car packed and all that good stuff, and it was like a week and a half before I had like secured a place to stay, like finding
temporary housing here. Is other than a hotel is almost non-existent.
Yeah, like not even like a rental. I was trying to get like a 6-month rental, and it was just really hard. But somehow I had found like it wasn't Airbnb, but it was called like YO Airbnb. Yeah. It was just like, I guess, our version of Airbnb in Sheridan. And he's like, "Yep, no problem." So then I was like, "Yep, I'm going." So then it was like the week that I'm leaving, and it was Saturday. Like he ghosted me. Like couldn't.
He was probably up in the mountains, like playing around.
He probably was, but like would not respond. So I ended up driving the 18 hours out here and didn't know if I would have a place to stay. And then he finally got back to me on Sunday, because it took me the night to drive, and I drove through the night and camped at truck stops, did all the fun stuff. Yeah. Right. So then I got there Sunday, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we're all good, but you can't move until Wednesday." And I'm like, "Oh, that."
So we're not necessarily all good.
Yeah. So that first night, I didn't really know what was going on, so I slept in my truck, and then I got a hotel. And then my first day at Weatherby, my truck was just still like
just loaded.
Loaded. Yeah. There was only the driver's seat, like the passenger seat full, the whole back full. So it was pretty fun.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's tough. Almost all of us moved here, so
yeah.
Like we all had. There's a lot of empathy, I think, with the challenges around the move. It's hard.
Yeah. So I would say, and then I honestly, man, it was kind of when it was hard to buy a house, but I was totally committed. Bought a house in like the first 3 months of living here, and it's been pretty awesome. I can't believe it's been 3 years already since I've been
Time
working.
flies.
Yeah.
I've got my 7-year anniversary in 2 weeks.
That's pretty wild.
It's crazy. I was one of the first hired as part of the move to Wyoming. So it's been an adventure. Sure.
So where did you start? See, we had a little bit different. I grew up hunting, but you were more of
I did not grow up hunting. I grew up, I would say, like adventuring. Mm-hmm. My dad, did a ton of motorcycles. I was a sports kid too. Played soccer. Ended up playing college soccer, and loved to do stuff outside. Every summer we'd take vacations to the Southwest Colorado. Just loved that area. And I think what was most like formational in my kind of decision to get into the outdoor industry was actually my dad had a good job. I think he kind of had like your first job out of college. He had a good job, but he was not passionate about the company or the products. He worked for Sally Beauty Supply, like the stores.
Yeah.
He kind of overseed all of their IT stuff, and like he had a really cool job, but he didn't really care about like hair dye and combs and stuff like that. And I could see that, I think, on him at times, where it's just like there wasn't the passion there. And I just remember thinking, I appreciated so much the sacrifice that he did, because in Dallas there's like no outdoor industry in Dallas. There's some companies there now, but back then, like, there's not we just a bunch of computer jobs in the 80s and 90s, and it's a different animal. But I appreciated that he provided so well for our family, but I just remember seeing him like kind of not depressed, but just like he'd come home and need to decompress a little bit.
Yeah.
And I just made like a self-vow, like someday when I grow up, I'm going to like work somewhere where I'm like absolutely passionate about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I could only imagine what my parents actually thought when I told them that I quit my job and all that stuff, because my dad was a farmer, and he's like, hey, you're going to go to school, you're going to get a good job, and you're not going to have to work
you're not
18-hour day. Yeah, you're not going to be a farmer, essentially, is what like my dad wanted, like that next step.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because then I did all the check that box, good GPA, got my job right out of college, and I hated it. So it's like funny how life, you might have this plan, and then it's like, well, let's throw that out the door.
I know. So I learned that there's like one thing you can make the plan, but like executing the plan sometimes it's not linear. So I'm at an early age, like probably middle school, like in my mind, I was like, I'm going to work. And I didn't even know what that meant at the time. It was like, I just remember I wanted to work somewhere where I was like passionate about what it was I was doing. I knew that had to be part of the equation. I was a high school soccer player, club soccer player, ended up playing for a couple years in college. During college, I remember like this phone call probably broke my mom's heart. After being away at school for the first year, I remember calling her, and it's probably March-ish, and she's expecting me to be home for the whole summer. I'm like, hey, Mom, I just got a job as a whitewater rafting guide in Colorado. I'm going to be home for literally a day. I'm going to like swap some stuff, grab some old clothes, and I'm going to head to Colorado. By the way, I'm going to live in a tent for the entire summer. Nothing to worry about. Everybody in the whitewater rafting community is stand-up people, and she's just like, what are you talking about? And so I ended up doing that for 3 summers.
Had you ever done that before? Was there any kind of, because you were in Northwest Arkansas, right?
The school I went to in Arkansas was Central Arkansas.
Central, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you were on like the White River or anything like that.
It was actually very close to the Little White. I was an hour north of Little Rock.
Gotcha.
Searcy, Arkansas, Harding University, little D2 school.
Yeah.
I ended up like kayaking. Like that portion of the river was not like whitewater kayaking, but I would just kayak and fish. It was pretty fun. I grew up shooting guns, but I wasn't a hunter. I just never hunted. Mm-hmm. But I loved the outdoors. I loved to ride motorcycles, bikes. We would take trips to the west. And I always had this like impression, like I gotta live in the mountains, and ended up getting married relatively young. My wife and I got married when we were both 22. I was not done with school. I drove a school bus. When I was a school bus driver when I got married, so I made all the money.
Yeah. Nice.
And my wife was she was a school bus driver also. So she was like, as soon as we got married, she had been a part-time student. She quit school, never went back. And I spent the next 4 years, when I had 1 year left, basically just going part-time to finish up. So out of necessity, I just started working construction, swinging hammers, learned a lot about just how to do things, that you don't get to do as you're growing up, how to build a house, that kind of thing. So a couple years into that, I finally graduated, and then had a great opportunity to get into product development at a company called Prime Source Building Products. So I had this background in construction of how to use the tools, and then I got a job in product development making new tools, which was really cool. I loved it. I love making stuff.
Yeah, you're kind of a tinker at heart. Because your job before being COO here was VP of Sales, Marketing, and Product Development.
Yeah. Product development that was my vehicle to get into the outdoor industry. I built that foundation in the construction products industry, and had that moment where I was like, I don't really love this. Like I like construction. We need it. It's not bad, but I'm not like a passionate builder of homes. And so I was like, man, I got to figure out how to get into the outdoor industry. And I started applying places, nothing. I would call HR directors or the Davids of the world, our HR guy, and be like, why didn't I get, they're like, you don't have any relevant outdoor industry experience. I'm like, well, it's kind of like that chicken and egg game. Like, man. So I ended up starting a chapter of Ducks Unlimited because right after I got married, we had a friend that got me into duck hunting, and I got like immediately was hooked, went all in on duck hunting. That turned into like, how do I duck hunt more? Okay, when it's not duck season, how do you hunt other things? And so I just went to an archery shop and bought a bow because there was an area that near us where you could shoot pigs, like just spot and stalk.
Yeah.
So started doing that, and then that turned into deer. Then that turned into like going to Colorado for elk, and started this Ducks Unlimited chapter so I could say I have outdoor industry experience. And finally, I got a job doing product development at Coleman, the outdoor company, in Golden, Colorado. And then was there for several years, ultimately became the director of product development, met a mutual contact that your old boss, he was a peer of mine, Curtis, and just great experience in the outdoor industry and more like the general outdoor industry. Learned a lot about how to not market and how to not do things.
Yeah.
And just kind of realized as private label was growing, it's like, man, the Coleman as a brand was strong. It was an old brand, but I had this realization, like, unless we really start to do something like this brand is not growing.
Yeah. It's like one of those big brands that it's kind of like, let's maintain. Let's sell $40 chairs.
It went to a big company, and they just wanted to milk it for the profit, and then in an effort to sell themselves.
Yeah.
And they ended up doing that, and I would say they killed the brand in the process, and it was hard to watch. It was hard to be a part of it because you're like, oh, man, we've got such cool people. We got such cool products, and we could make even cooler products. And they're like, yeah, we don't want to do that. We just want to make money. It's like, well, to make money long term.
It's kind of like nearsighted.
We don't even really care about that. We want to make money now. And so I was like, I don't love this plan. So I had gotten further and further into archery hunting, and very long story short, had an opportunity to work at Bear Archery. I led their crossbow program, having never touched a crossbow in my life, but I sold them on how that was a good idea, and I was able to deliver the project on time, maybe actually ahead of time, on budget. It was really fun. Ended up going from there to Walther and back to Arkansas, and was the vice president of marketing and product development, and ultimately I had sales there as well, and then ended up here.
Yeah, but when you were at Walther, you're kind of in the same boat where it's like, yeah, I love my job, it's great.
Yeah.
And then like it was that timing when Weatherby moved from California to Wyoming. We're like, ooh, Wyoming's kind of a cool spot, huh?
I miss the mountains. Like my wife and I both, I think, really miss the mountains. We miss the West, and when the idea of living in a place like Sheridan came up, we're like, I do think that Arkansas might be the most underrated state in the union, but there's still things that we probably miss about Arkansas. Like it's an affordable place to live, or at least it was. They've got mountains, not like Bighorn Mountains.
They have the Ozarks, yeah.
They got the Ozarks. We are super close to the Ozarks. There's tons of great fishing, great hiking, awesome mountain biking. Anyway, we love being in Wyoming. So
it's like Arkansas has actually been like that next state that's been a lot of people have been moving to, because it's like, California to Texas. Now I think all the people from Texas are actually moving to Arkansas. I actually saw something the other day that is one of the fastest growing states last year for people moving there.
Ultimately, it's like, Northwest Arkansas, Bentonville, Fayetteville, but what they've done with Walmart, and then they use some of the money, I guess, from the Walton family, but they invested so heavily in making it a mountain bike community. Like it's like the new Moab. Like there's such good trails and stuff there to ride that they installed, and they're darn good. It really drew people in. Like it's a destination for vacation too now.
That's pretty cool.
It's pretty neat. Yeah. So that's a really short version of kind of how how I got to here. So I've got a question because I want to answer this question, but I don't want to ask it to myself. But what's something that you learned along the way that has helped you get here? And before you answer it, I want to tell you why I'm asking the question, because we have a slight generational gap between us, and most of the other people that have been your age, they don't have that same like go-getteriness, I would say, that you have, or even level of organization. And I think that's really made you excel here. But not to force feed that answer to you, but what do you think it is that you picked up along the way that has given you that?
I'll answer like two answers to this. The first one that I think maybe you're looking for is like not being afraid to move places or take chances on maybe yourself. Again, I always felt like when I quit my job, I wasn't worried that I would never have a job ever again. It was more of like, I want to like pursue something that I am passionate about. But you just kind of take that risk, and manage that risk. I mean, to me, when I quit my job, I was like, hey, this is where I am now. The risk is I'm 24 and I feel confident I can get another job, but I could live this life over here. But the life I wanted was just, you got to give a little bit of risk to do it. Yeah. And then my second one would be honestly just, it's kind of like following up, like building relationships with good people that you want to surround yourself with. It's not necessarily always about the job. Like, when I came to when I went to AOB, like two people that I did really like there at that company was like Matt Kinnamore and Curtis Smith. Like you surround yourself with like people who are like-minded and have like high, like settling is not good. So you always want to like, same when I came here, like meeting you and Adam, like surrounding yourself with people and then just being a good follow-up person, like check in on people. So those are kind of like my two things, like building the relationship and like, but not being afraid to take an opportunity and go after it.
That's good.
What about you? What is your answer?
I think that I would say the understanding that every day is an interview. And I think that kind of could dovetail into the follow-up thing. But when I went from being a part-time student, but when I finally full-time worker, part-time student, when I finally graduated, I went to Prime Source Building Products or this management training program, and there was a bunch of 3.5 year and 4 year college grads in this management training program with high GPAs, and then there's me, this like almost 8 year not doctor guy that just has a general business degree that's been working full-time for the last like 3.5 years, and I already had that like kind of gotten my first job jitters out of the way, So I was there to be like, hey, this is a competition. I'm going to win. And the other guys were like, I'm here to party. So from that day, I realized like, man, if that little bit of extra effort to just show that you care, that you can do the job, went so far. And it just always has stuck with me. So
yeah, I guess we've talked about this. Like when we did that event together, I guess I was a little naive. I didn't realize that you were like the VP of Weatherby. I just like
that was the biggest part of your interview. You didn't even apply for the job yet.
Yeah, so I didn't actually know. Like in my head, like when we met, I was like, oh, the marketing guy at Weatherby is Luke. The interview. Yes, I interviewed several months later, but it was really at that event, like that.
That's when John actually came to me because we debriefed. John and I drove to Texas, which is a long way from here. It's like a 16-hour drive, but it just made sense on that trip because where the hunt was in Texas, like the nearest airport was still like 4 hours. It was logistically challenging. But we kind of debriefed on everybody, and we're like, man, Tyler was pretty awesome. He was on top of it, personable, really got it. And then John, probably before he emailed you, I remember he came to me and was like, hey, you remember Tyler? I'm like, yeah, Tyler was awesome. He goes, he asked about a gun, but what do you think about him for that marketing job? I was like, oh, that'd be super good. You should talk him into it.
Yeah, and I do remember when I came out for the 4th of July, me and his wife, Janelle, and John, he took me up. We went hiking and did all kinds of stuff that weekend. So, it is fun. You just never know. But that's just it just goes back to that mentality of like, if you really do love something, you got to bring it every day. There's no coasting. There's no days off.
Yeah.
So,
Every day's an interview.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every day is an interview. I like that. That's good.
All right. As it relates to Weatherby, what's your favorite Weatherby rifle right now in our current lineup? It's March 2025.
March 2025. This is a tough one. I'm gonna have to go with. Man, it's so funny because there's just so many things. It's like, I like this one for this reason, and I'm get spoiled because you get to use them for different hunts.
We're gonna go together on a mule deer hunt this fall. Your favorite gun that you want to take on that hunt? How about that?
Okay.
Give some specificity.
On that one, I would take an Alpine CT.
Mm-hmm.
And personally, I'm going to purchase a 300 Weatherby. So on that one, I just know that there could be a little bit farther shots. So I want something. 300 Weatherby would be great. And it's going to be a lot of hiking though. So what I love about the Alpine CT is it's still right around 6 pounds. It's like 6.3 pounds. So I can still put a bunch of attachments and accessories on that to make sure I have a stable shooting platform. So it's like a good balance between being lightweight, but also really easy to shoot still, because then when I put a scope and put a bipod, it's going to be probably like 8.5. And for that particular hunt where I know it's steep and deep, there might be right around 500 yards is not uncommon. I know.
No, it's not.
It's almost like you have to shoot that far if you want to hunt that country.
It's like 500 plus or like 20.
Yeah. Yep. So that is where my head's at. But if I was going to get super specialized, if I could pick any cartridge, I might go 6.5 300, because that's like for mule deer. That's like to me like the perfect blend. But my recent purchase is 300 Weatherby.
Right on.
What about you? What is yours right now?
That one's hard to beat. I love the Mark V family, but since the 307 line was kind of my baby, it's hard to not pick one there. And even though I love the Peak 44 stock, I love the folding stock.
Yeah.
So I'd do the Alpine MDT carbon. I love the BSF barrel. I love the folding stock. I would, for this hunt, probably do 300 Weatherby too.
Yeah.
You're hunting across a canyon, and so I've been super lucky since being here. I've killed a moose with 300 Weatherby, a zebra, multiple elk, and it's just, there's not much it can't do. A black bear and like there's so much. So
yeah, and we're loading that 195 hammer, and that's got a good BC. I mean, it's just it's a
tremendous luck with that one.
Yeah, it just seems like that's the cartridge to go with. See, I like the Alpine MDT carbon as well, and I think, because I love the Peak 44 stock so much, that's what's like, if I'm going to shoot a 300 Weatherby, it's got to be with that stock, because it does such a good job managing recoil. So, but I like the MDT carbon if I was going to do a lighter caliber, just because like a chassis there's something with that 3D hex recoil pad on Peak 44 that just, it eats up that recoil.
That hunt, there's so much time walking off trail through the woods, being able to fold that stock and put the gun, the whole gun, in the bag of my pack, like nothing to snag. I'm a fan of that.
Yeah, especially if you're running a suppressor. Those are both
absolutely yes.
But yeah, I was gonna say both of those are the shorter 22-inch 300 Weatherby too. So yeah. What scope you putting on it? Ooh, right now I've been kind of a Leupold Mark V snob. They have a 3.7 to 18. I can't remember what the reticle is on that one, but that scope is just so perfect for me. I'm doing first focal MOA on that. So
yeah, I've talked about. I love that scope too. So just to be different, I like it a lot. The Night Force NX8. 4 to 32. Big fan.
Yeah, I've been those
focal plane.
Those two are awesome. One scope I do wish I would like to try, and we actually have it in the custom shop or in our showroom downstairs, is that Leica that is only $1,400.
The Ampless.
Mm-hmm. I've been intrigued with that, because you think Leica usually are like a little more expensive. I mean, the Mark V and the NX8 are going to be around $2,000. So like that Ampless.
That's a lot of scope for the money, but it's a second focal plane only.
That rules you out for sure.
It rules me out. I'm pretty adamant on the first focal plane situation.
Yeah. I use a little bit of both. I've been doing much more.
I can use both. I could. I just don't want to.
That's fair. That's fair. So I've been, but you've kind of got me into the first focal plane a lot more too. So, and I've been using that a lot more in the hunting situation, just for, leaning more into some of the competitive shooting stuff. It's a little bit easier transition. And I'm kind of like, hey, if I'm going to do like an NRL hunter or something, I'm doing that truly to practice to be a better hunter. I want all that shooting and repetition to kind of translate into my actual hunting.
Yeah, good call.
So
good call.
that's the main reason I switched too. Yeah. So
one of the things I ask, like if you've ever been in an interview with me, I ask this question of everybody.
I know what you're gonna ask.
What do you want to do when you grow up?
Man, that is always such a fun question, because some days it's just I always say that time is relative, right? It's like, what is grown up? Yeah. How, like, some people start their first business at 50. Some people started at 30. I don't ever specify in that question, like, as it regards to your life, your career, your, like, it's open for interpretation on purpose. Yeah. So I think my I probably answered this differently than before when I first started here. But I know I truly want to be, when I grow up, is a storyteller. And what I mean by that is I love doing the content side and putting that stuff together for Weatherby and all that stuff. But it also then is like a double meaning, in the sense of, like, I want to do things now that are worth like telling and sharing and just living, right? So, like, getting to do things like Kodiak, like, you actually, when you had, like, one thing that sticks with me a lot is, I think I asked one time, I was like, oh dude, how do you take good photos? And it was when you were in Kyrgyzstan, and you know what, Tyler, you go, you just got to do cool things. And that has just stuck with me. So if I had to say right now, when I grow up, I want to be a storyteller.
That's good.
What about you?
That's good.
Where are you going?
Man, I want to be a good father. I've got 5 kids now, so I want to keep. I think I am a good father. I want to keep that up. I want to run a business one day. I'm close with Adam with COO, but I do want to run a business one day as CEO. I want to keep living where I want to live. Yeah. The lifestyle that we have in Sheridan, it's just been unreal. Like, getting to ski in the winter, hike in the summer, like every season. Like, I feel like 7 years into living here, we kind of figured it out this year, and it, like, staying active year round, it's been a blast. And we just want to keep doing that.
Yeah, it's crazy how Sheridan is, like, when I try to think of what I love about Missouri and what you do, it's just like there's so many things to do here. Like, you can ride, like, for you guys ride dirt bikes, you guys ski.
Yeah, I mean, we're almost to dirt bike season. I'm like counting down the days.
You guys hike. We've been running a ton. Yeah. That's like a personality in itself right now. Yeah. So it's like Sheridan's like it's not like defined by seasons in, like, winter, summer. It's like defined by activity seasons. It's like, it's ski season.
It's snowmobile. I don't have a snowmobile, but I want to get one now because it would increase my access to skiing. Not for the snowmobile side, but
so you'd snowmobile in and do some crazy
some backcountry stuff. Yeah, I've done some skinning up the mountain some this year, and I'd love to get access to more terrain.
Yeah,
it's been
that's
fun.
Cool.
Yeah. What you got? We got time for one more question. It's on
one
you.
more question. Oh wow.
We don't have to limit it there, I guess, but
man, I should be better at this. Oh man. Man, I'm blanking right now. You put me on the spot.
I did.
I was gonna say something about if you only had to choose one thing to hunt, what would that be? Like mule deer.
Yeah, no question.
That was very, very direct.
Yeah. I'll tell you why. I think finding big mature mule deer is, like, to me, it's like the biggest challenge in hunting. I mean, it'd be really fun to hunt sheep all the time, right? But
yeah, well, that's also something that's attainable.
Not as realistic, but you could legitimately only hunt mule deer. It's funny, like, the difference between an immature mule deer and like a reclusive big buck that most humans may never see. Mm-hmm. Elk are fun to hunt too, like hunting the a bugling elk is an amazing experience, but it's cheating, right? Like you can call them to you. You can't do that with them.
They make a lot of noise. They say, "Hey, I'm over here."
Yeah, exactly. Mule deer don't do that.
No.
They're just like these silent, just patriarchs that just, I don't know. And there's just something about like it's a huge, big, wide mule deer, and where they live, they're just legit. And I like them.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I actually don't even know what my answer would be. It would either be elk or mule deer, but it's for two like totally separate like reasons. I think on the elk side, I just actually think what I love the most is just where they're at, like backcountry type stuff. So that's where I think I like elk more, because I haven't done a lot of backcountry mule deer hunts. I just haven't. But elk, I mean, I've spent, probably 100 days just in a tent in the backcountry. So that's why I would say elk. But if it that's what this fall, I think I told you, is like, I'm in it on mule deer backcountry hunting. That's what I'm going to put all my time into this year.
It's hard. It's hard, like with a family, to carve the time out to do it. But I'm in this. We're gonna do it. We got to make it work.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on where you live. If you've got like great deer in your yard or whatever your extended backyard is, but where they live, man, it's not easy to get to.
Yeah. And the mule deer are interesting because they can kind of live in all kinds of different stuff, like
the diversity.
Yeah.
And elk. I guess elk are similar. You get them out in the prairie too, but I don't know. I just have so much respect for mule deer, and they're not like the most resilient, like compared to elk and whitetail. Like they need our help. They need management.
Yeah, and I also think they have a little bit more character than an elk. An elk, like the benchmark, is just a really nice 6-point. Right?
Yeah.
You do get some non-typical stuff, but not like you do in mule deer. You get mule deers with big fronts, mule deers with big backs. You get
look at like Eastman's, right? With their commemorative whiskey bottles.
Yeah.
They've got like all
Goliath
the big, Morty and all these like big named mule deer. Like I'm sure there's named elk somewhere, but I don't know. They just take on a personality, and they're awesome.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's a good answer.
Tyler, thanks for being here. It's been a pleasure getting to work with you the last 3 years, and hope it's many more.
Yeah, me too. This has been awesome. Again, I think the reason you love your job is that the people you get to work with every day. So we've got a good team, not just on the marketing team, but honestly across all departments. It's fun. We're a pretty small team. So I mean, I can walk over to customer service and talk to them. I can walk to product development. I can walk to engineering. Not every company you get to do that. So it's pretty cool.
We got a bunch of passionate users, and I think it has shown in our product lineup here the last several years. We've got a lot of cool stuff that's come out, and we're not even close to done. Like the stuff that's on the list right now is insane.
Yeah, it's like the joke in marketing is like, hey, we'll just do that when we slow down, and there's no such thing as a slow down. It's just
slowed down yet.
It's keeping up with what's current, and then kind of like on to the next awesome thing. So it's been fun.
Yeah, there's always like some kind of far-fetched, thing that you would not expect us to do, like the 307 action. That was on the list for a long time before we really felt like we were pulling it off to the level that we wanted, and there's some other things like that.
But then it's like, then we just pull out of nowhere 224 Varmint Master back relived, and it's just like totally different, like history and new, right? So that's pretty fun.
The Varmint Masters have absolutely gone nuts. We're almost sold out for the year, and it's March.
Yeah.
Of what we can like legitimately have the capacity to produce. I'm shocked.
Yeah.
Pretty fun.
Yeah, it's great.
Pretty fun. Fun to work for a company that has its 80th anniversary coming up later this year, that has so much history, has not lost its way. We're huge blessings. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great.
Cool.